Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vitality Secret podcast. I'm delighted to be here today with Dr. Darin Deterra. He is a licensed marriage family therapist who started studying somatic, which is body-centered therapy, and healing in his late teens and 20s. When he was 30 years old, he was told that he had a small lump on the back of his neck that was cancerous and that he had 4 months to live. Dr. Darin saw this as an opportunity to apply his training to himself. Within 4 months, he was cancer-free. He went on to live in Brazil, Switzerland, and India, where he studied healing in greater depth. Dr. Darin, thank you so much for being here. It is an honor to have you on the show, and I'm really excited for what you're about to share.
Thank you, Neil. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we met at a mastermind where we discuss all things energy, quantum, manifestation, healing. And Dr. Darin was a speaker, and he really caught my attention when he talked about his cancer recovery story. And I immediately contacted him. So I'd love to start with that. I know there's a lot of directions we can go into, particularly with what we just discussed prior to pressing record. But firstly, would you like me to call you Darin or Dr. Darin? What's better for you?
It's all good. Darin is fine.
Darin, great. So could you give us a story, Could you give us some background? Can you tell us about this cancer remission and what you were told at the beginning of the diagnosis?
It was a day that I'll never forget, Neil. I visited the finest doctors at UCLA and USC, and both of them said that I had a 100% chance of dying if I didn't have this small lump on the back of my neck cut out along with a quarter of my skull. So I would have had, a large dent in my head. And I remember saying to the doctor, "Oh, you mean I have a 99.99999% chance of dying?" And both doctors looked at me with a sober expression and said, "Darin, if you don't have this surgery, you have a 100% chance of dying, 100%.
My goodness.
And even if you do have the surgery, you probably won't live longer than 5 years." This was in 1987.
Okay.
So I left the physician's office and I'm being honest with you, I broke down and cried because I knew I was not going to do the surgery, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I'd studied healing and all the kind of things having to do with healing, listening to the body, somatic work, Willem Reich, etc. And I knew I had to apply that learning to this situation, or else I was a fraud. So I contacted some people, and I basically did 3 major things. I totally went on a medicinal diet. At that time, it was macrobiotic. That's not really big anymore, but it was what I needed. It was basically giving my immune system a vacation so it could address what was already there. I went to a absolutely brilliant Chinese medicine doctor who had studied in China, and his name was Matt Van Schoten. We started tracking that my immune system was dealing with about 9 different things: pesticides, petroleum. I'd lived by a freeway, all these things with strep virus, and number 9 was this cancer. So it wasn't even at the top of my immune system's priority. My immune system was bogged down with so much else. And we did everything. We went through a period of doing snake venoms. We'd work every couple of days. And what happened is the cancer would adapt very quickly to an herb or medicine. And we'd have to switch the medicine. It would adapt to where the thing that was reducing it would actually start to increase it again. So we had to work every day or two with new medicine. And he was able to actually measure the progress of its going down. Now, the interesting thing is I was going through my oral and written exams while this was happening for my license as a marriage family therapist. I had a PhD, but after this experience, I decided I didn't want to go through any more licensure. And I'll tell you about that later. But
interesting. Okay.
I'm going through this licensure, and I'm seeing that the physicians are kind of they're boxed in. They have to tell me chemo, radiation, or surgery, or they'll lose their license. They'll lose their right to practice. even if I die through one of those 3 procedures, they're completely safe because all the forms are signed. But if they recommended something else and I healed, I could still sue them and they'd lose their license, even though I benefited from the treatment. So they don't really have an option of what to recommend. And as I'm going through my licensing as a therapist, I'm seeing that I am getting boxed into a similar system, which I'll talk about later. Anyway, within 4 months, and it was right after I finished taking my exams, and I knew I'd passed, that we found that there was no cancer. And then we took a biopsy in the Western medicine, said, hey, it was a spontaneous remission, probably because of the initial biopsy that triggered the, they didn't want to think that anything that had been done elsewhere from Western medicine had any contribution. So they came up with this explanation. And for months, I kept getting these. Well, first of all, I received all these letters from doctors covering their butts. Well, we said these because they're afraid that I'm not going to do what they said to do. Then they get very scared. And I had an oncologist, and he wrote these letters. Anyway, 2 things that stand out is, one, I kept writing letters saying, hey, I healed myself. I kept saying, use me as a guinea pig. Do it this way, track what I'm doing. What have you got to lose? Because if it's successful, it gives you information, and you want to stop cancer, right? Nobody would talk to me. So nobody, for a year after that, or 2 years, nobody would respond to any of my letters, which told me that it was an invalid statistic, right? Because it was no longer I wanted to be entered into that statistic. So the next time the physician found something similar to me, they'd say, you have a 99.999% chance of dying. And they might wonder, well, what happened with that 0.001? But they didn't enter me into the statistic. So it was an invalid statistic.
My goodness.
And the second thing that struck me is that as a therapist, I was getting boxed into the same deal. There were things I had to do that I didn't agree with in order to keep my license. And if I didn't do them, I would lose my license. So I started to embark on a journey after that took me around the world studying healing.
Incredible. Yeah, the system is just, there's no words to describe it. Let's just say fascinating.
It's a top to bottom system. So those at the top are making billions. I mean, pharmaceuticals, et cetera. This is
COVID.
Well, that's $1 trillion industry. And money really has more to do with what decisions are made than actually the well-being and health of the client or patient.
This is my understanding as well. When I wrote my book in 2016, I reported that cancer was a $185 billion a year industry. And every illness really is an industry. Diabetes is something like 60 billion. I can't remember the latest statistics of COVID, but it's almost 200, I believe, already. It's a money game. And I don't want to go too much into this now. I'd love to actually understand what you did to reverse this 100% chance of death diagnosis. Well, this reminds me, by the way, of one of Deepak Chopra's quotes. He says, accept the diagnosis, not the prognosis.
Right.
So we can use the system where it's brilliant, we can honor it where it's good, and then just understand where it's not so good and where it's really quite harmful, in fact. So I would love to explore with you, what did you do during those 4 months? And maybe before that, what is your personal definition of what cancer is now?
Well, first of all, I just want to share one thing before I answer that. Every physician who worked with me and every holistic practitioner who worked with me on this has died of cancer since then. Every single one of them.
Wow.
The OMD, the macrobiotic counselor, the oncologist, the surgeon, they've all died of cancer. And I think the reason is that I didn't stop working on it after the cancer was gone. There were a lot of preconditions I had to work through. And then I had to work with the emotional trauma that I felt was underneath the physical illness.
Huge.
So, and I kept working on that long, years after the cancer, in fact, decades after the cancer. In terms of what I did, I would say that there was a fundamental energetic shift in my body, although I wouldn't have said that at the time. I would have said it was a biochemical, I looked at it as a biochemical condition at that time. And in other words, that it was a problem, the immune system was just overtaxed, and all of our immune systems, if we're eating an American diet.
Totally.
At that time, what I thought was a healthy diet, I later found out that, I stopped eating dairy then. I haven't eaten dairy in 30 years. I occasionally have a little bit, but that's been a big life changer.
Yeah.
But what is cancer? It's the body's, I think it's the body taking toxins throughout the system and localizing it to one particular area. The interesting thing is that the lump on the back of my neck was actually on the gallbladder meridian. And I had a problem with the gallbladder because I had some stored anger and pain regarding some traumas I'd been through in the years before that. And I knew I was off track when this happened. And I knew this gave me an excuse to do some inner work that I don't know if I could have done otherwise, because there was some resource. It's very expensive to heal.
Yeah, and it's not covered by insurance.
3 things. It takes time, money, and courage. And sometimes when you have time, you don't have money. And when you have money, you don't have time. So to have all 3 of those at the same time is the thing you want to have.
Courage is a huge thing. And you must have had is it fair to say you must have had some kind of inner knowing, some innate knowing that your body is designed to heal itself?
That's so true. I studied Wilhelm Reich, who was a disciple of Freud's. And, Wilhelm Reich ended up in prison for this thing called an ergon box. But that wasn't the great work he did. The great work he saw the relationship between the body and mental health. And he said, for every repression of the mind, there's a corresponding repression in the body. And I thought, whoa, I really resonated with that. So I started studying him in depth, and he had a disciple of his named Alexander Lowen, who founded bioenergetics. And Alexander Lowen said the body doesn't lie. So in a sense, cancer to me is when the mind accepts a lie, and that lie finds its way in the body. It's like cancer's fear manifests in the body. And where there's fear, there's a lie. So I had a basic lie about my life that was manifesting as a physical illness. And the thing that really I studied in my 20s was that listen to your body. Your body knows the truth. Your body is truth. And the head can get caught up in all kinds of stories and beliefs, but the body just is straight truth comes from the body.
Your body keeps the score.
What's that?
The body keeps the score.
Right. And later when I started doing energy work, I kind of adapted that the energy body doesn't lie, because that's more specific, that energy doesn't lie. When your energy is flowing, you're in the truth. When your energy is blocked, there's something that's not true going on in your body. So these were things I knew, and I knew that my job was to get my body realigned, that something had gone off course. And I thought, I could do surgery and still be off course, completely off course. Yeah. So I've got to really rectify this to a cellular level.
Brilliant. Have you heard the slogan, the organs weep, the tears, the eyes never shed?
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah.
William Osler. I just want to go back to what you said about gallbladder and anger. With my clients, I use the emotion code, and there's many ways to do somatic. Have you heard of the emotion code?
Not specifically.
It's you can use kinesiology to determine the names of the emotions, where they're stored, when they were stored, and then you can release them super fast. You said gallbladder and anger. That's exactly in the box for the gallbladder here. Gallbladder, anger, liver, anger. Right. When I went to the Truth About Cancer Live Symposium in Texas, I think it was 2016. In 2015, this is one of my wake-up calls, actually. I lost 3 friends to cancer in the space of a year, and that caused me to go and do a lot of research, just like I did with my father's stroke and my eczema, which is my own story, which I won't go into now. But I did a lot of research in cancer and really wanted to understand what it was, because like you, I just knew it wasn't what the mainstream led us to believe that it is. And I always had this innate knowing that there's something more to the story. And my focus is, I think I've told you, is chronic inflammation, which is like a symptom of toxicity in the body and chronic stress or chronic stress. So I remember one particular talk, and they were talking about all these emotions, and they had a chart on the presentation slides with the body and all the organs with different names of emotions in the different respective organs.
Kidneys, fear, lungs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I, to be honest, at that time, my level of awareness, my level of consciousness wasn't there. And I kind of brushed it off a little bit, and I went to a different presentation. And then like a year or 2 later, it came back into my awareness, back into my consciousness. One might say I'm at the frequency to understand now the role of emotions in the root cause. I often think of it's the ultimate cause of illness, because you could have a bunch of people working on a toxic building site with asbestos, which we know is cancerous. Not everyone is going to get cancer. Some will, some won't. So what's the ultimate cause for us or people, the ones who get cancer? What's the ultimate cause? It's normally a weakened immune system, and that's often because of trauma ultimately. So I really like that you brought up the anger there, because it's massive. And this is normally my experience of interviewing people and helping people myself. The emotion thing is often the last thing people address. They'll go and do the food first. They'll go in the anti-inflammatory diet and juicing and cleaning out the body, which is all important, of course. And it's not until they get further down their healing journey that they start to understand the role of trapped emotions, aka trauma. Yeah. And that's now your specialty, isn't it?
Well, I would say that, first of all, I talk about healing the core of your body, and there's 3 core systems. There's your respiratory system, your lungs, your circulatory system, your heart, and your digestive system. Each of these serves an energetic function, an emotional function, and a physical function. So you're not just digesting food, you're digesting your life. You get something happens, you can't stomach it, right? The feeling gets stuck in the gut, or you get a gut feeling about something, but a trauma happens, and your stomach the peristalsis stops, the digestion stops, and you start eating and blocking that emotion or that energy, and it becomes a physical illness. All physical illness in Chinese medicine begins in the intestinal tract, and the second is the lungs. And you think about people who smoke a lot. That's sort of grief, and so they're filling their lungs with smokes to not feel the grief. Then the kidneys are the third, and that's fear. You think of a young child who's scared and they wet their pants. Kidneys. Then we have liver and gallbladder.
Lung, grief. Exactly what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And then the liver. That's Chinese medicine. The liver and gallbladder are anger. That's the next stage of illness. And you think about a drunkard who gets drunk and is angry and belligerent. That's the liver. That's cirrhosis of the liver. And then the heart is the most advanced stage of illness. So those 5 organ systems are the 5 branches in Chinese medicine, and each one of them is significant in our health.
Interesting. It's so important, this part, isn't it? It's so important. It's arguably the first thing to address with everything else, but it's
the ancients would say that all illness begins in the light body or luminous body, the energy body, which is the field around the body. So before it even gets in the body, it's in the field. It shows up as impurities in the field. So the illness starts in the energy body. I think it often goes to the emotional body next, and then it reaches the physical body if it's continuously bypassed or not paid attention to.
Interesting. I've got a book called Electric Body, Electric Health. The body electric is a huge fascination of mine, actually. Aileen McCusick, do you know that name?
No.
Bear with me 2 seconds. This book,
Right.
Electric Body, Electric Health, and it's everything about the biofield. And, we're going into the quantum now, which I think is the top of the hierarchy of healing, as I call it.
Right.
I picked up this book as well, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Right.
People are experiencing all kinds of radical remissions and spontaneous healings at his events by practicing the same technology over and over again. But yeah, the quantum realm is massive. What was I going to say about energy? Right. So I personally didn't really understand the role of trapped emotions and trauma until I understood the physics of emotions. And it was when I actually watched a presentation by someone called Dr. Jerry Tennant, and he explained how, in fact, no, it was the emotion code first, Dr. Bradley Nelson. He talked about how emotions are electromagnetic bundles of energy, and we are electromagnetic beings. The heart has the strongest electromagnetic field, but everything about us is electromagnetic, and it's energy at the highest level. We're like 99.999999999% empty space and energy. Mm-hmm. And the moment we understand that emotions are stored like bundles of energy, electromagnetic energy, or the moment I discovered that, I was like, another penny just dropped. So if we can release that bundle of energy, it's like you're taking your foot off the garden hose and allowing the energy to flow again, like allowing the water to flow. I use the analogy of a garden hose. Normally, if everything's flowing freely, the water's flowing freely. But your foot on it, you have a drop in flow, drop in energy, a drop in voltage. Yeah. Dr. Jerry Tennant said that a characteristic of all chronic illness is low voltage to an organ. And one of the main reasons that happens is because of trapped energy. So if we can figure out why there's not enough voltage, not enough power going to the organ, I like to use the analogy of a house. I used to be an electrician, so when I discovered the body electric, I really started to, more pennies just dropping all the time. And I thought, okay, not enough power going to a light. Why is there not enough power going to a light? Why is the light flickering? Meaning organ, why is the organ not functioning? And then you can effectively reverse engineer why that's happening. And going back to your story, you talked about the gallbladder and there being anger there. It's as if, well, it's not as if, the way I understand it is the voltage is dropped. So therefore the gallbladder is not functioning as it would. Or anywhere in the body, it can be presented like that. So that helped me. I just wanted to bring that in there because for listeners, it helps to understand that it's not woo-woo. Emotions, I used to think it was kind of woo-woo, understanding emotions and trauma, but it's actually physics. It's electromagnetic. And going back to the somatic part of your bio, that's one of your specialisms, isn't it? It's actually somatic therapy. Can you speak to that now? Would that be a good time?
I just have the ability to meet a person and read their body. I can tell what's going on in their physical body, their emotional body, their energy body. And everybody works in a different order.
Amazing.
So some people need to go straight to energy, some people go straight to emotion, but I've just gained that ability. What I would say in my own journey is that I gave myself 3 years after the cancer was healed to not set any new goals. I just finished my PhD, I got my license, and I realized I did not want to get my PhD license because I just started to see that as it's not really about healing, it's about business. And there's a lot of things about that industry I started to find distasteful. But what happened at the end of the 3 years is I really worked I worked very hard. I had trauma going back to birth. And if you think about it, a lot of trauma in our society is in the first 2 years of life. And that's before you can talk. That's before you can walk or talk. So verbal talk therapy has some limitations if talk is your only way of working through things. And also in the first year or two, you're still in a symbiotic relationship with your mother, with your parents. you haven't got a separate sense of self. So to go in and heal something, it's kind of like going down to the foundation of the building and rebuilding the foundation those first 2 years. Not easy to access that stuff. So by the time I'd had the cancer, I had done 10, 15 years of work, and I healed back to where I was 3 years old. And I was happy to stop there. But this cancer forced me to look deeper at the first year of life, first 3 months. And what happened is my father left when I was 3 months old, and it became really clear that he resented me for being born. And I internalized that and felt that I didn't have a right to be alive. So subconsciously, I was killing myself. It was suicide. Whoa. And I think things like cancer often are suicide on an unconscious level. Like, I don't have a right to be here. I don't have a right to exist. Well, we know from Wilhelm Reich's work that the first character armor develops around the right to be and exist. So I knew that it was really deep. And, what I did is a lot of work and a lot of body work, a lot of talk therapy. But I got through rebirthing back to the birth trauma and went through a big grieving process 3 years after this happened.
My goodness.
And I felt like I got to the crux of the emotional problem. And at a later stage, then I went to South America. I actually went there to help my mother. And I was looking up world-class healers. And I saw Brazil and Philippines were the two countries that I kept coming to. So I went to the Philippines, and they have some interesting stuff there, but it wasn't really what was needed. So I took my mother down to South America. And lo and behold, I received great healing, and I ended up living down there. And really studying how a lot of people, in indigenous cultures, they would say that all illness begins in a spiritual dimension. Mm. And so I'm studying this, but I'm also studying quantum physics at the same time, and I'm seeing that quantum physics is a language that it's a metaphor. I mean, you talk to physicists in universities, and they'll say all this spiritual stuff is gobbledygook. It's not true. But what we're doing is we're taking the metaphors in quantum physics and we're applying them to spirituality. And so everything that the indigenous people were saying had a parallel with quantum physics, a parallel theory somewhere. And that on a deeper level, on a, like you could say on an emotional level, it was cellular. And then with the quantum physics, it was on a subatomic level. Yeah, it was down on a much finer level. And my experience is that all emotional problems have some element of an energetic block, an energetic accumulation, energetic deficit, but it all comes down to energy, even emotion. And this is where we talk about quantum physics changing the face of mental health in the 20th century and psychology.
And all health, I'd say.
Thought and emotion as a frequency.
Yeah. Yes.
Every emotional skill you develop, if I develop the ability to actually forgive, I mean, really authentically forgive, I'm going to be sending a whole different frequency out into the world than if I'm angry and my liver is toxic. And this goes for everything from transforming fear to communication, to listening to your core, etc. It's all frequency. And that is the consciousness of the 21st century, I believe.
I'm 100% with you. Yeah. I mentioned before our call that I spent a week with Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced retreat. And he and others, it's not just him, others are doing it as well. They're measuring the body, they're measuring biomarkers. What's happening with our genes, with our DNA during meditation? What's happening when you're in a deep meditation and visualizing on being healed or visualizing whatever you want to bring into your life? They are literally measuring the biomarkers. So science, true science, not money-controlled science, true science is showing us that meditation gives us a biological upgrade. It gives us an upgrade in our genes and our DNA.
Yes.
And there are scientific studies on meditation bringing inflammation down and, and many other illnesses. And you can literally find this on PubMed. You can look at it in peer-reviewed medical journal. It's there. So I'm with you about it being the consciousness of the 21st century. It just needs to hurry up a bit now, doesn't it?
It has correlations with computer science too.
Interesting. Okay.
Our health industry is, parts of it are, the thinking behind it is very much based on mechanical physics. Like a manual typewriter, those old-fashioned typewriters where you hit a key and the key hits a stamp and the stamp leaves an imprint on the paper. And we've got to change the ribbon. We've got to take the key out and fix it. We've got to do something mechanical to get the mechanical system work. And we're still thinking of our bodies that way. I've got to cut this thing out, and I've got to, or even taking a drug to change the biochemistry. It's still mechanical physics, and we haven't gotten to the point where we're seeing ourselves as computers, as elaborate computer systems. Down in Brazil, like, I'm 65. And I have never worn glasses. I've never had laser surgery at all, and my eyesight's 100%. Why is that? I went down to South America and I had my eyes worked on, and I don't even know how it works. But I told an optometrist this, and he said, "Well, that's impossible. You had bad vision as a kid, and it corrected itself to 20/20." He couldn't imagine that you could do anything that would heal your eyesight without touch, without medical intervention. But I saw these kinds of things hundreds of times.
Brilliant.
And I started to learn the ways of the indigenous people, how the healing works and how they looked at healing. And it required a tremendous shift from the way, even at that point in my life, my holistic thinking was limited in some ways. And opening up to these quantum dimensions, which the ancients would call spiritual, and we kind of laugh and snicker at that, but they were so advanced in mapping out the energy body and and what we call quantum medicine now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the quantum realm is just where we're going, isn't it? It's just a matter of how fast we get there, and we can learn so much from indigenous cultures. You talked about sayings earlier. We often say, listen to the heart. What does the heart say? And it sounds woo-woo until you understand the science of the heart and the fact that we actually have a brain in the heart. Science has shown that we have 40,000 sensory neurites in the heart. The heart literally has a brain. It contains memory.
Neurocardiology, yeah.
Right, yes. So we've got these incredible sciences, which few people are hearing about.
The neocortex, the thinking brain, is the engine that drives everything, and the heart is like the caboose. And it's the other way around. The heart is the engine. The neocortex is there to take directions from the heart brain.
Totally, yeah. And the Heart Math Institute has shown us that is reflected in the direction of communication. So it goes, the majority of communication, I believe up to 90% of communication goes from the heart to the gut, then to the brain, which suggests that the brain should be in service to the heart. The heart brain, the head brain should be in service to the heart brain, not the other way around. But most of us are wandering around in our heads in the programmed intellect or the learned intellect. And that's not actually the highest level of intelligence. It's not the highest level of consciousness. The heart is the highest level of consciousness, and it is our access to our intuition. It's our access to the quantum field where we can download infinite amounts of information. And sadly, it's a part of our, I guess, as long we've been alive, it hasn't been in our awareness about what can happen in our bodies when we are in a brain and heart coherent state. And again, Dr. Joe Dispenza is measuring all this stuff. So we are finding ourselves in a time where science is truly catching up with these principles of spirituality, of indigenous cultures, which is amazing. And they're probably just going, yeah, well done, you're catching up now. Well done, well done. You're getting it now. It's all frequency, right? You're getting it. So it's
and all trauma shows up in the energy body. I think that's really important. I give the example of I get a certain number of women who've been sexually abused or raped, and it affects the physical body, but there's the in our culture, we put the emphasis on the mind remembering every event that happened. And while that has some value, you can heal without remembering every detail. But the first step is remembering what happened and getting total recall. Then you have your emotional response, and there's grief, there's anger, etc. But you can heal those without being fully healed, because if the energy of the perpetrator stays in a woman's body, like if you have an adult perpetrator who's putting his sexual energy into a child, that child's body doesn't know what to do with that. And that energy can stay inside the person, wreaking havoc on their nervous system for decades. It's when we remove that perpetrator's energy from the body of the survivor that we start to get a resense of balance. So it's not just mental or physical, it's emotional and energetic and spiritual as well.
How does one...
All those quadrants, as you've said so beautifully, all 4 quadrants are essential to healing.
The physical, mental, emotional, and energetic. Yeah. So
Right.
Could you talk us through how one would remove the energy of the perpetrator? How would you do that?
Well, a lot of people are taking a weekend course, and I've taken a lot of them. And then they put up and a lot of these people do have talent, no question, but they'll put up a sign and say, I do energy work. And the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people kind of laugh at this, because I spent more years studying this than I did getting my PhD. There was more for me to learn, and critically to unlearn in order to learn it. A lot of the greatest healers in the world had like a 2nd grade education.
Totally.
So their thinking brain doesn't run interference with the healing process.
Some of the wisest people don't have the education.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I had to start unlearning. The minute I finished my license, I started a process of unlearning everything I learned in school.
Doing Yoda.
There are a few valuable. What's that?
You're doing the role of Yoda. You must unlearn what you have learned. One of my favorite expressions of him. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
unlearning is part of the healing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge. I find myself doing that with my clients. I'm like, we have to unlearn all of this stuff you've learned until your present age.
Right. I think one of the key ways of unlearning is to trust your intuition 100%.
Totally.
Don't ever override your intuition, because you're overriding your body's wisdom.
Yeah. And no longer is that woo-woo now. No longer is that woo-woo, which I think is really important to know.
I think people say woo-woo. I hear a lot of people saying you have to listen to the science. But a lot of people who are saying that aren't actually studying the science in the depth they think they are. They hear a report on the news. There was a study that said this, and they just take that. Science is questioning. That's
100%. We have to question it, or it isn't.
Yeah, it's a quest of questioning.
Totally.
And that starts with ourselves, questioning ourselves. Yeah. I had to ask, what's going on with the masculine part of me? This was on the masculine side of my body. It had to do with my father. Where are my masculine wounds here as a man, and how can I heal them and be a better human being in this world? And it started with my father.
How would you say you released that energy? Do you use different protocols with different things?
When I went down to South America, I continued doing breath work during that time.
Brilliant. One of my favorite things.
I cried for 4.5 years, almost every day. At some point during the day,
wow.
I'd be walking across the street, the tears would start coming out. I was just going, when is this going to end? But I think a lot of us are carrying years of grief in us. I think especially men, because we've been so trained to be men and to be tough and
don't cry.
Strong. And I still find myself kind of falling back into that false strength. And whenever I do that, it's like, okay, there's a part of me that's feeling vulnerable that I'm denying, that I need to get in touch with here, because I've been so programmed as a male to toughen up and be a man, as we call it. And there's nothing manly about that. It takes superhuman strength for a man to break down and let the tears flow. And that's really a critical that's a critical way. We discharge illness in several ways. I mean, I knew somebody who was ill and they started taking these Chinese herbs and then they felt nauseous and they stopped taking them. And I'm telling this person, that's how your body wants to discharge the illnesses, through throwing up. You need to throw up.
Yeah.
And so tears, throwing up, sounding, there's a few ways that our body discharges. Sweat lodges. Yeah, shaking, that's fear.
Breath work. Yeah. When I do breath work, my legs shake a lot. And my whole body, because in fact, during ayahuasca and plant medicines, my entire body gets activated. If anyone were to see it, they're like, what the hell is going on with this guy? But my face is calm the whole time. My whole body's shaking. And the visuals are telling me what's going on, the visuals behind my eyes. There's so many ways of doing this. I'm not suggesting ayahuasca is for everyone, but it's breath work is huge. Talking shaking, that's emotional release. And I've actually been leading a group of Wim Hof breathing, which isn't transformational breath work, but even with Wim Hof breathing, people are experiencing emotional release. They're crying, and they're like, "Whoa, where did that just come from?" I was just breathing. Why did it start crying? Yeah,
5 minutes of breath work with a client, and they will go to a deeper level.
Yeah,
and then we start, and then we're doing the energy work the whole time. Now, the energy work is a whole nother deal in South America, parts of Africa, and Asia. They have a whole different way of looking at things. And their way of looking at trauma is they talk about, and I'm going to just say it because it sounds so crazy to us. They talk about 3 levels of what they call spiritual attachments. They say basically disincarnate spirits attach themselves to the energy field body of a person. And they talk about attachments where something's in the field, obsessions where something just becomes an obsession that's coming from an energetic source. And then they talk about possessions, and where literally something takes over the person. Now, in quantum physics, we know that all consciousness is matter, all disease is consciousness, which is, if you think about it, it's just brilliant that all physical mutations come from a consciousness. South America, they look at those consciousnesses and they say that's a spiritual attachment. But in quantum physics, we might say that there's an energetic cyst or an energetic condition, and that energetic condition has consciousness, and it traces back to some trauma in your life. I don't care how you look at it. I worked with a woman in Seattle for a year, every day for a year, and learned how to remove these things. And so one of the first things in a session is I remove all energetic disturbances from a person's field. And sometimes people feel really terrific after the first session. They go, that was great therapy. Wow. Well, there's some things that I do that I don't talk about that really clear the energy field. And the goal is, you see, you want your core to be open. You don't want to have blockages in your core. People tend to either block their stomach or their hearts or both. So you want both of you want the whole core system, the respiratory, the digestive, the circulatory, to be energetically free. So energy passes through the crown. It doesn't get stuck in the head. It moves through the body into the ground, and the core of your body is connected to the core of the earth. Your feet feel like magnets pulling you down into the earth, and you have a strong field, a strong boundary system around you. So my goal with every session is to have the person leave with an intact energy system and a more clear energy system. Now, some people have major challenges, and it takes some time to do that. And also, you can clear somebody, but if they go back to their bad relationship, their bad work, their house that isn't clear, they will pick up energetics again. So you want to get to where the norm, the normal resting point is one of energetic clarity and openness.
I love that. And what powerful work you're doing. That's incredible. You remind me of something.
It's really amazing because, when you work with the body and with energy, people go through transformations much quicker than through just the intellect and the emotions. And I'm not downplaying the intellect and emotions. I'm saying that we've got 2 of the 4 quadrants, and the body energy quadrants, those are really transformative in my experience on another level.
And and just speaking to that, I believe somatic therapy is far more effective than traditional talk therapy, because talk
Yeah.
therapy can end up giving energy to the very thing you want to de-energize. And in
Right.
neuroscience, there's that term that says nerve cells that fire together wire together. So the more you talk about something, the more it becomes energized, the more it becomes more of a block to balance, to harmony, to what you're wanting. And somatic that's why I'm a personal believer in somatic over, traditional talk therapy and whatnot.
But because the body doesn't lie, and we can chase thoughts around. How do you know where to start a therapy session? I'll tell you, when I listen to your energy body, you will go down to the right where you need to start. You're not going to be chasing things around for 3 months trying to find out what's the most important.
Right.
Your body takes you right down to the bottom level. So you're not dealing with what happened when you were 10 years old. You're dealing with what happened when you were 2 years old. The 10-year-old experience was a re-traumatization. The trauma started when you were 2.
Yes.
And you don't have to suffer and agonize for months or years on end.
Yes. I've done a lot of trauma work myself, actually, and I recently did something.
I can tell.
Oh, you can?
Absolutely.
I'm glad it's evident. I recently did a form which did pretty much what you're just saying. It's getting to the root of the trauma, because all the other ones on top were consequential of the original trauma that might have happened when you were 6 months old or something. Yeah. So she, through meditation, she was able to peel back the layers of the onion, and something that happened to me at 25 wasn't actually the root one, although it was a massive impact. I'm just giving an example. Even though it was hugely impactful, it was actually something that happened way earlier in my life. Mm-hmm. So when we went to release that, it's just a great way of thinking of it, isn't it? I always talk about peeling back the layers of the onion. Right. So really finding the ultimate cause of the imbalances and what creates dissonance. Something I wanted to what's what I was writing down just now. As you were talking about the indigenous approach to illness and dis-ease and kind of correlating it with quantum physics, I interviewed the business partner of Nassim Haramein a few weeks ago.
Oh my God.
Who's like superseded Einstein, apparently. So Mark Hines is his name. He's on my podcast. And he said, do you know what the ultimate cause of illness is? And there's me being a bit cocky. And I was like, a drop in voltage, lowering of frequency. And he said, no, it's dissonance from the quantum field. Uh-huh. You're out of harmony. You're not coherent with the quantum field. And it's everything that you're talking about. It's everything about the energy body. It's where there's that stuck energy creating dissonance. And then there's other things that cause dissonance as well, like toxicity that we're eating, or electromagnetic fields, or our cell phones right next to our.
Well, you can run into places, you can walk into buildings and feel that dissonance.
Yes.
It's well known that when people drink a lot of alcohol, the energy body it's kind of like we're all like satellite dishes in a sense. But we're picking up low-grade frequencies certain places. When you have sex with a lot of strangers, they say that you retain, and your energy body retains what's in their energy body for 7 years after sex. Whoa. So you take somebody who's going to a lot of prostitutes, or you take people who are just having a lot of casual sex, and there's nothing morally wrong with it. It's just there's energetic hygiene, and you might find yourself walking into a bar and you just feel your skin crawl. Well, there's some bars and taverns that are just filled with dissonant energy, as you're describing it. And so you need to be aware when you walk into a place where it feels like your energy field is being encroached on, or it doesn't feel harmonious, and trust yourself and leave that place, and then think about, do I need to be there? That's so interesting. I've done that before. And I've got the idea of energetic hygiene is really important, because, you hear about the Me Too movement, and they say, you need to have consent before you have sex with somebody, you know, saying that. But there's also energetic, there are people who overstep energetic boundaries. There are people who attack you energetically. If somebody attacks you and you get upset, that usually means that their energy has penetrated your energy field. because if it doesn't penetrate your energy field, it's not going to affect you that way. So we're getting bombarded with stuff energetically. If you watch a news program and you find yourself, wait a minute, think about what is that doing to my energy system and to my emotional system. If you step into a certain room and people are behaving a certain way, there are energetic attacks that do take place. And for women, it's really important to know that men need to not only respect your physical body, they not touching your body without your consent, but we need to respect each other's energy spaces. I always stay out of people's energy fields. I always stay outside of the field. And I think people need to learn that you don't enter another person's energy field without their consent.
Interesting. I've not considered that before. Thank you for bringing that into my awareness. Yeah. Wow. I could talk to you for hours. There's so much. I would love to just circle back to something you said earlier about your declining eyesight and not having it. I mean, your eyesight's 20/20, and how you prevented declining eyesight. In an earlier podcast, someone like you, his name is Terry Tillman, is now 80. He's got perfect eyesight. Like you, he just knew when it was declining, there was something he could do about it, and he did some work, some quote unquote work, energy work around it. He actually said to me, what I discovered with eyesight is there's normally something in our lives at some point that we just don't want to see anymore. And it's the body's reaction to that, and it starts closing down the eyesight. So if we can get to when we didn't want to see that thing and release that from the body, the eyesight can effectively come back. It's not quite that simple, but there's a process. That's ultimately finding out what energetically happened before the event in the physical world.
Right.
And I think that's huge. So going back,
there was a point after I went to Brazil where I started visiting my father in New York, and he's the one I had this trauma with. He left when I was very young. And I started doing healings on him because his heart wasn't good, surprise, surprise. Anyway, I would every 6 months come and do energy healing on him. And at one point, he started telling me all these things he felt towards me. He said, I've never liked you. I said, really? Why not? And he said, I don't like you because I didn't like your mother. I said, well, we're different people. And he said, I didn't know that. And he said, I resented you for being born. Why did you resent me? I didn't want the responsibility. I wished you were, I don't like boys. I wanted you to be a girl. All this stuff. There's all this stuff, right? But the energy is like truth serum. He's in the energy field, and all of a sudden he's saying, I knew all these things already, but it was confirmation. And so he's saying all these things. And it was the energy that was causing him to say, because he was a narcissistic personality. He wasn't self-aware, but he had enough awareness that just came out, just blurted it out. And near the end of his life, the healing got significant enough that he started actually being kind to me. And the last time I saw him, he was like an angel, just smiling and beaming, and we were holding hands.
Incredible.
So you heal yourself enough, you actually can have a healing impact on the people who traumatized you most.
Now that is powerful. Wow.
Yeah.
And a soundbite right there. Incredible. We're just gone over time. Actually, I understand your time is valuable. I just would love to circle back to the cancer reversal this astonishing result that you have achieved. Would you say the majority of the quote unquote work is energy work, is the emotional work, rather than the physical that you did over those 4 months? Or would you say it really is the physical, mental, emotional, energetic? You did it all, did you?
Well, see, here's the interesting thing. We tend to think of those as separate.
But they're all energy.
It's all one morphogenic field, right?
True.
So your morphogenic field, it's not like, okay, we're going to put the emotional part over here, the mental, it's all one.
It's all energy. Yeah.
Having said that, I still eat very, very clean diet. I pay attention to the diet. I have not veered from that dramatically. I've had some moments where I just got sloppy and then I had to rework it. But I continued to do the emotional processing, and the energy work is what I do for a living. It's just an integral part of who I am. I also spent a fair amount of time with Ram Dass one-on-one at his house in Hawaii before he died. And that was just fabulous. He was an incredible energy healer. People know that guy. He would touch people and they would just start crying, but nobody really, he didn't talk about that. But in the last years of his life, he became one of the preeminent healers I've ever met.
That's just incredible. There's so many extraordinary beings, people out there, aren't there? Masters.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all there. You know, we can find them if we look for them. And I personally believe we need to just kind of understand the limits of what is presented to us in our society, mainstream, etc., and understand that there is another way. And it's
one thing that I've heard said is that everything you've been told is a lie. You start there and then try to see what
and then go back. Yeah, I like that. When I tune into the mainstream media, I'm like, what lies are being told today? Oh, look at that. Yeah, it's anyway, your healing journey is just phenomenal. Thank you for sharing it. First of all, where can people find you if they would like your support? And are you offering yourself for support right now?
Yes, I do Zoom sessions, and amazingly, people go through transformations on Zoom, as you very likely know already.
Yeah.
They can go to darindeterra.com is my website. My phone number is 831-332-4421. And
+1.
Neil, it's such a pleasure talking to you. It's just you're so grounded and such a clear speaker, and so open and yet so well contained. You're a living example of somebody who's doing the work.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you.
It's such an honor speaking to you. Really a pleasure.
It's been an honor speaking with you. I must ask you one last question.
Yes.
What is your number one vitality secret?
I think my superpower is I'm in touch with the infant part of me. That's I reclaimed the infant part of me, and that's my genius. I write and produce music, I illustrate, I write books, I've done TV and radio, but it all comes from this infant part of me that's now integrated with the adult part. When I was cut off from that part, I was lost. There was a piece missing. And the infant part allows me to be vulnerable and tender with people and hear them in a deeper way. So I would say, health is being in touch with the child, the infant, the aged wisdom, and every age in between. We're not cut off from any part of our life, past, present, or future.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's having that childlike wonder in our day-to-day innocence of just complete astonishment of what we wake up to on a daily basis. And
the word naive, a lot of people say that as like you're gullible, but actually the word naive means native it's with the T taken out. That's actually the root of the word naive. It comes from native or innate.
Interesting. Now I remember all of your word. What would you call it?
I look at the history of words because the most powerful words came from ancient civilizations, and they always had to do with something very simple and very earth-like.
Right. Yeah, I love that presentation you did. Thank you again. And thank you again, Darin, Dr. Darin. That's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an honor speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will put your details beneath the podcast, as always, for anyone who'd like your support. Thank you for all the...
I give a free 15-minute consultation. If anybody wants to just ask questions, they can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Vitality Secret podcast. If you liked this, please leave a 5-star rating. And if you loved it, please take a few minutes to leave a review. The more ratings and reviews that are left, the easier it is for this life-changing information to get into the hands of people who need it. Reverse chronic illness, strengthen your immune system, and build resilience at vitalitysecret.com. wholeheartedly.com.